Welcome to Recruiting.work, a place to connect, communicate, and collaborate on all things recruitment. This session is brought to you by Outmatch. Just as Recruiting.work brings people in the talent community together, Outmatch brings recruitment technologies together, combining assessments, video interviewing, and reference checking software. They're creating a more holistic, more human hiring experience. Learn more at outmatch.com. All right, let's jump right into it. Thank you everybody for attending another session in Recruiting.work, where corporate practitioners all get together and talk on various topics within our recruiting community and our profession. Today, our topic is screening candidates on high volume recs, something that I think everybody has to go through, but try and keep it to a minimal as possible. But a lot of times it's just, if that's the set of type of roles you're recruiting for, welcome to that world. With us today, we have Matthew Liptak out of Boston, Glenn Morani out of New York City, William Uranga out of Phoenix, and Brenda Turn out of Portland. And before we jump into the session today, I do want to do one quick housekeeping item, and that is in regards to the chat area. So I encourage any and all audience members to go into that chat area and add any comments or questions or anything that you want to add to the conversation, please do. But before you do, if you click on that chat area at the bottom, there's a drop-down menu that says to all panelists. I just need everybody to change that to say to all panelists and attendees. I wish it would default to all attendees, but it doesn't. So please be sure to change that setting so your questions and comments can go to everybody in the group. So with that said, Matt, how about if we have you sort of kick off the conversation?
Sure. Thank you for having me. My name's Matt Liptak. I'm up here in Boston, as Sean had mentioned. We're talking about high volume requisitions. Now, I go back to my days. I had been a manager of talent acquisition at Nuance, and I was in their healthcare division recruiting on medical transcriptionists, remote roles nationally, and they were high volume. And my team was assigned the task of finding 50 to 100 transcriptionists at a time for large hospitals nationally. And I trained the team in a much different way to screen at a quicker pace and a more condensed screening. And we built a screening process that was condensed enough where we could get through several different types of candidates in a quicker time frame, a more condensed set of questions, quicker screening and view of the resumes, and our conversations were actually condensed. And what that did was it gave each recruiter the ability to get through these screens faster, get these resumes to the hiring managers at a quicker pace, and then also get the candidate through the recruiting process quicker. We also created talent pools of these candidates by doing these quicker and condensed screens and put them into these pools so we had candidates that we could touch at a moment's notice for these types of roles. So it was a very good process, and I've used that process, actually this more condensed type of screening, at several different companies. And when I do encounter high volume type of requisitions, slimming down or condensing that process has become essential for these types of roles. And I think it's going to be that much more important to have that type of condensed screening if you're looking at the roles such as manufacturing, such as healthcare types of roles, to have that more condensed screening and have these types of talent pools established as well.
A great question from the group, from David Marr, about how are we defining volume or high volume? Is it number of applicants, number of openings? Is it the frequency?
I think that the number of openings is how I have always defined the high volume piece. But also on the flip side, the number of applicants that you may get in for these types of volumes. We would have 50 to 100 open roles that we were trying to fill. That was the volume that we were trying to get through. But we also had an applicant pool that was overwhelming, hundreds and hundreds of applicants because of that type of role. So I think that to me speaks to the volume, but I look at it as the amount of roles that we had on our plate at the time.
Yeah, I would agree with Matthew. I've seen both situations where you have a limited type of roles, but very high volume, call center, sales reps, and stuff like that. And then we've also had ones that seem to attract everybody and their proverbial brother applying. And that's a high volume, even though you may not necessarily have a lot of people to hire numerically for your staff. Either way, you should really have, as Matthew was saying, well-oiled, solution for that in the sense of processing people and getting people through and responding to them.
I think the time frame, as someone just asked about the length of time that you spend on a pre-screen, the time frame was something we had to define as well. 10-minute screens, 15-minute pre-screens per candidate, or even less. So a quicker pace to go through these pre-screens, or even to go through the resume at a quicker pace, having that knowledge that, hey, we got to get through screens quickly here.
Yeah, Udemy, we define volume a little differently. For example, we have evergreen sales roles. Like I manage the sales recruiting team and the go-to-market teams. And so, for example, we recently just did a hiring sprint where we had to hire, 9 to 12 people in one given month. And these are entry-level sales roles. So that 9 to 12 is actually a lot of volume compared to, again, the applicant flow that we get. So we have this algorithm that our ops team put together as far as how many applicants does it take to get to recruiter screens, to hiring manager phone screens, to on-sites, to offer, and that ratio and the algorithm. So we can define, okay, how many recruiter screens that needs to happen in order for us to get the output that we need for the hire for the month. So that's been really helpful for us just to understand the throughput ratios of what we need so that we can kind of work backwards a little bit. And then also working with the business to define a really laid out interview plan where we have defined interviewers. We have, batch day interviews where we dedicate 2 or 3 days out of the week just to do interviewing to get through that volume to ensure that we're not cutting corners by doing less on the recruiter screens. So instead of doing the 10 or 15 that you mentioned, Matt, my team still does the full 20 to 30 because we want to make sure we are interviewing qualified candidates to get them through the process.
Once you determine something's high volume or however it matches in your company, are you typically posting a rec for each opening that you have, or are you working off of an evergreen rec where you're just kind of feeding off that evergreen and placing them into the designated rec?
Depending on locations, like we would have recs that were per location, but we'd have that evergreen rec for that one region or location. But we would get in 200, 300, 400 candidates per rec for those locations. So it was a matter of having one recruiter that was assigned, going through the resumes to see if they're qualified for the particular rec and that region, and then the other recruiter doing the actual screens.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to mention, as far as high volume is concerned, you get a lot of those. If a role is more what I call a commoditized role, where you're going to get more people applying, if I post a job, I always post at a level higher. And the reason I do that, and I'll give you an example. We had a role for a data analytics person, 5 years experience. If I post that job, I'm going to get 90% of college graduates applying for that job that just, got out of school. And that's just a lot of waste, I don't say wasted time, but it's a lot of time you're spending just going through resumes. And, so you have to kind of, it's all about time on return on your time invested, right? You want to maximize that as much as possible. So, but anyway, just want to make that comment.
Man, when you're talking about screening, are we talking about phone screens?
You're talking about the screening process. Yeah. So yes, again, one recruiter going through the resumes to look at the resume as it applies to the role, and then again another recruiter doing the quick phone screen or pre-screens. We're talking a few years back that I had worked at Nuance doing this, so that was a time when they didn't have the sophisticated technology to do the pre-screen weeding out of candidates. But now, of course, they have that. But, the recruiters were assigned to contacting the candidates, in those quicker, lesser, more condensed screens on the phone to get the 3, 4, 5, 6 different questions they had out of the way so they could push them forward.
Glenn, let's jump over to you, and because you're you'd kind of do like a pre-screen via email format.
Well, yeah, it all depends, right? So I'll give you an example, and I'm on the consulting side of the business and have been, but we have one of our clients at Optima is the city of New York, and they put out a large RFPs occasionally, maybe once a year, not this past year because of COVID, but and when they come out, you're talking about like 100 requisitions and different skill sets, and we have 3 weeks to respond. So that's a huge amount of volume, and you're talking, and usually it's mid to senior level type of skill sets, IT related. So we have to respond to as many as we can, right, to increase our chances and probability of closing. But the thing is, number one, you have to have a strategy in mind, right? Before you do anything, right? You have to have a strategy on steps you're going to take, to tackle this type of a requirement. As a recruiter or recruiting manager, it doesn't really matter, right? So the other thing is, I categorize talking about people that are coming in through postings. I kind of break them down into 4 areas, right? One are the people you looking at the resume. One are the people you want to contact. They look spot on, given their given their job history, et cetera. If you're a recruiter, you should be able to do that over time and pick out people that look really good on paper, right? So that's number one. That's the people I want to tackle first, right? I want to call those people and get those people through the process. Then there's ones that really look good, maybe for your organization, but maybe for not this requirement, but they have a really good track record or good background. You want to put them in that kind of like, yeah, I want to contact this person, but it's not going to be for this requirement. You don't want to lose that person, right? Somebody responding, you don't want to lose sight of that person. Then you have the people that just aren't a fit, whatever they are. Say like that, for instance, it's a recent college graduate and they need 5 years experience, and most of the time I don't hire college graduates anyway for our clients. So, that's the don't contact pile, send them a thank you note type thing. And then there's the 4th category, which I call, I don't know if I really want to spend time at all on the phone with this candidate, but I have a canned email I'll send. I may want to ask that person a separate question or something. I do that now still with some candidates because I'm running into situations where some of my clients, so we do direct permanent placements too, that they're tight on the salaries. And I don't want to waste somebody's time and, for this particular job and actually have a 30-minute conversation with a senior level candidate to get nowhere. You know what I mean? So I'm totally upfront with them. I never have an issue with anybody coming back to me if I'm honest with them and saying, you know what, for this requirement, I just need to know. I need to know what type of salary you're looking for. I don't disclose the salary with the client, but I ask them to give me the salary or something like that. That's just a question. But when it comes to skill sets, if I don't see a skill set and I need a skill set, I'll ask that person. I'll go back. Do you have that skill set? Have you had cloud experience? If so, where'd you do it? And they respond, but it saves me time personally. So, and saves my team time. That to me is almost like a pre-screen. But I agree with Matt. Definitely. I mean, you have to have a condensed process for screening. But it all starts with trying to screen the right people from the beginning, right? People that are high probability people for close. Because that puts you, that will give you a quicker response time for your hiring managers.
We had to also put in too, when looking at that, we had to think about who is going to fall off through the process. When you start building these pipelines up, who is going to be the fall offs. If you do have that qualified candidate pool, as you put them through the process, there's going to be those fall offs throughout. Building that candidate pool up in abundance at the beginning. And then as it goes through the process, it's going to get slimmer and slimmer. But it was definitely building up those talent pools, which is
yeah.
a big factor.
And speaking of that, the one other thing I want to mention, which is really critical, I think, as a recruiting manager, we worked all kinds of different ways. We tried, we'd align a person with with a hiring manager. We align people by skill sets. We did all type of different things on how to respond to a requirement. But what I felt worked good is if I assign a recruiter to this high volume requirement, it doesn't mean my other recruiters can't submit people. I don't want them to spend time sourcing because they have their own. But if they have a pipeline of people they can just reach out to, I want them to do that because I want to get the best person forward. But I don't want them spending a lot of time sourcing people and going through that. That's somebody else's accountability. But to give them that opportunity though, because sometimes you have your own pool of talent, your talent pool for the same skill set, and you're 5 or 6, 7 different recruiters, right? So you just want to get the best out of your recruiting team and get the best person forward or best people forward.
Glenn brings up a great point. Specialization on your team of recruiters, or whether it's sourcers, whether it's recruiting coordinators, this high volume is where it makes sense to specialize in tasks or areas of responsibility. That's where it can be paid off, and you can start developing these expectancies around time. Perhaps even lends itself to automation and even remote testing and stuff like that. But that's where you can start experimenting when you have people that get really good in focused areas, if that makes sense, depending upon how many positions you're needing to hire, whether it's seasonal or ongoing.
Kind of along those lines of the specialization and knowing your candidates, what have you, are we building out, because when I associate high volume, I also associate high turnover, right? So you're going to have to work that same rec consistently. If you get to the point where there are no openings for that position, right? Let's say you fill them all. It's a holiday rush or something like that. You fill them all. Are we shortlisting people when it opens up again? I have my top 10 people. I have one new opening. I'm reaching out to those top 10 people, trying to get them to apply, and I process them through early at the stage, maybe even before it gets posted or as it's getting posted. Are we doing that, creating like a target list at all?
And I think that's where the talent pools come into play as well. I mean, I think the pools that I've created in various types of industries, with various types of job roles, have had just an ongoing pool of candidates involved in that pool that you're continuously sending out marketing emails or campaigns to keep them warm. And I think that's a big factor, especially when you're shortlisting candidates in that pool. You want to keep them enthusiastic about some of the opportunities you'll have at the company, especially if you know they're coming up soon. So those pools were essential to keep those candidates shortlisted.
Yeah, I would have to agree with Matt there. Like, I think I mentioned in previous panels too that my team, we use nurture drip campaigns. We used to use it through our ATS, but now we have a system called Top Funnel that has been proven great success as far as building talent communities, talent pools. As I mentioned earlier, we did a sprint recently on entry-level sales roles, and now we're done with the sprint on one of the roles. And so, but we're still engaging the university systems, we're engaging different platforms to try to build a warm bench so that when these roles do open up or we have attrition, we have backfills, and we have a warm bench that we can actually go to that already have expressed interest in working at Udemy. And we continue to send those marketing blogs or white papers or whatever it is of things to the candidates to keep them engaged, that we're always top of mind, so that when we do have openings, we can engage with them immediately and get them into the process.
Yeah, one thing I want to mention is, working for pretty high management consulting type companies too. If we don't have a specific opening, but I have a candidate that's interested in our company, and that person has a really good profile, I'll start engaging with that candidate, because you never know. You never know when somebody's going to leave the organization. You have all these plans. You talk to hiring managers about their resourcing strategy, but then all of a sudden, one of our senior people is leaving, is resigned for whatever reason. Now you have this opening, right? And you really, I always feel that getting people, the more they know about my company that I'm working for, and the more I engage them, and it's, doesn't really matter too much what level they're at, but it's usually the more senior level people's. It's a process. It's a longer process to get that person, to get them interested in the organization. And the more people they meet over time, the better. So could be like an informal lunch with, one of the senior level subject matter experts in our company, but something to get them engaged and want to come and work for our company. That's important, I think, because you never know. You never know in this world, right? When somebody leaves and all of a sudden, we have this emergency requirement now, so-and-so's leaving, so.
All right. William, can we jump over to yours? I think you're mentioning in your notes around a selection list, fine-tune that selection list. I think that's where we're at.
Yeah, with what my fellow panelists have been talking about, as far as collecting data, if anything's good to be hoarding, it's data. Just every point you can be collecting stuff, particularly automatically. I remember at GoDaddy, we would have targets for how complete or how full the training session class was before the customer care agents got on the floor. And if you had 98%, then you knew by the time everybody finished, it'd be 95%. So it was well used of everybody's time, had a certain score, they got on the floor, and so forth. But if you have that, you can start working back and start tinkering and experimenting with either the sources or the questions you're asking to optimize for that. But once you have a persona, particularly if it's a role that regularly comes up all the time and it's in, again, high volume, not just year round, there's amazing things where you can start planning your resources. I remember the story where Disney worked with Gallup poll to crunch some numbers about just their internship programs, and not just the internship programs because they had so many come through, but they could actually know what school, what program, what semester to hit up the university students to ask them to apply to be interns that were then going to turn out to be part of their key leadership program. They're looking 2 or 3 roles down the road here. And if you have that kind of data, you can start planning your resources ahead and really be smart about where you are, when you are, and who you're talking with. So it all starts somewhere. So if you don't have any data, please start collecting that now and do it. And this also becomes the key part for talking about stuff from a budget standpoint and planning standpoint. When you can know, a quarter or 2 ahead of what you're going to need, and you know what the lead time is to get there and what it takes to deliver. I can't think of any other roles that can make a better business case for spend or for testing than these high volume roles. And you can talk about the impact of the business and tie it directly to revenue and so forth. We at another GoDaddy story that we had was we experimented during the Obama administration in actually engaging with vets. We found out that when they went through the program, they actually produced 19% higher revenue as a call center individual than our staff. So you can imagine what kind of conversation that was around executives when they realized, whoa, we just, that's amazing. So what do we do there? So you can actually have some of these long-term programs built up if you're just tracking the numbers.
Why are veterinarians applying to GoDaddy?
Vets, I'm sorry, former military service. Yes, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'm just joking.
And then you're going to make it's raining cats and dogs joke or something like that. I missed it, but no, veterans, people that have served, and that was a great story. That turned into being a great success story that we got to share in the community as well. Besides the business impact.
So let me ask you a question, because you mentioned data, right? And my big thing is, once you got data, how easy to get it, and then how easy is it to act on it, right? And this is sort of, Matt, why I was asking you, hey, are you doing phone screens and what have you? Getting that qualified information that you ascertain out of a phone screen into the system to be reused later can be difficult, could be easy. One of the questions in the chat area was, is anybody using a tool or an assessment type tool where you are collecting information and stuff like that? Have you guys or anybody used a tool for an assessment? Maybe, we all have that basically in every ETS where you can set your pre-qual questions if you choose to, when somebody apply. It's kind of hit or miss whether somebody uses that. And kind of, Glenn, to your point, after the fact, I'm sending a targeted questionnaire or what have you, or ascertain more of it. Is anybody using like an assessment tool at these top of the funnel stages?
Sorry, Brenda, go ahead.
No, we were testing something with the entry-level sales roles. Like, I think on the chat, Predictive Insights is one of them that we were looking at, where we can actually categorize like personas and competencies for specific roles and then build them out and take a look at the current team as far as who the most successful, let's say, entry-level salespeople would be and what type of attributes do they have. And then taking that and building something within Predictive Insights. And then so we can use it as a pre-assessment type of tool, but it's a project that we're still kind of working on, that we're still kind of looking into, but that is something that we are evaluating.
I can't remember the name of the firm that we had used at GoDaddy, but it was a scenario-based, not survey, but tool that we used that actually the applicant, if they made it beyond the initial, recruiter screen, would participate in. It was scenarios that they would face at the call center to see how they would react with other people recorded and what have you. And we did score that, and that would enter into the applicant tracking system as a score. And based on certain rating or ranking, they would then move on the process. We're also testing right now, my current company, we're getting ready to test voice to text as a way of speeding up our recruiters' times and doing screens, and hopefully making them a little bit more engaged with the candidate as opposed to, oh, I got to capture that thought down and typing at the same time. We're looking at, what is it? Humanly.io, there's Chorus.io, and a couple of different, Humanly AI, I think is what's called. In Chorus.io, we're going to be testing some of those to see if we can save time and get a better noise to signal.
The video interviewing is a big one too. I used a system called Reqs in the past, which was a video one-way interviewing where you have your questions put out there to the candidate videos themselves, and then sends it back through this system. And it was good. I don't know if I loved it, but it did save the recruiter's screening time.
Yeah, my reluctancy using the one-way video. In fact, when my clients interview my candidates and aren't on the video on the other side, I think that's so impersonal. It's like it's not a good candidate experience that I'm always conscious of. Regardless. So it's I think a lot depends too on the level of the position and if you just high volume but I think it's just it's a lot to be said though. I think for a candidate's experience, that's just my opinion on that.
No, I agree with you. We used it at a previous company as well, and I felt the same way. It really impacted a negative candidate experience. And oftentimes when we send a link for them to record a video when it's one way, the response rates would be so low because they would kind of be a turnoff because it loses that human connection that people always look forward to when speaking to a recruiter or a hiring manager. So for me, I'm a little bit biased where I'm not a fan of video interviewing, but again, some companies and some industries that may work better than others.
I have to say the assessment, we're talking about assessment tools. I was actually involved in an interview process with the CCAT, which was the Criteria Corporation's assessment. And it was both a logic test and a personality test. And I saw no reason to use this level of assessment. It just was just this absurd test on math, logic, and reasoning. And it was brutal. You have 50 questions, you have 15 minutes, and you have to answer as many of those questions as you can. And I just didn't see what bearing that had. I'm sure it did have an outcome for the hiring teams, but I've gotten rid of assessments like that at companies because I just didn't see them as a solution for hiring.
That's a great point, what Matthew and what Lynn's saying. If you don't explain the tie of what you're asking your candidate to answer or go through, what are you doing? Yeah. What kind of experience do you expect them to have if you don't explain the relevancy of what you're looking for and how they can best prepare? I'm not saying giving them the answers. I'm just saying to know what to expect.
Right.
Wow.
So a question for once you do get information, whether it be a video interview or assessment, getting back to that high volume rec process, and then going back to, am I working off individual recs or an evergreen? I've seen ATSs where if somebody, let's say you're doing rec per opening, I've seen ATSs where if you apply to one rec and the next rec is pretty much similar, what have you, right, you got to reapply from a candidate perspective. And then from a recruiter's perspective, the association between the two isn't there. Or if you go back and look at an older rec and try and pull people over, it's kind of click, 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 one person, click, 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 a second person. I just would lose recruiters with the too many clicks in theory. So they just kind of go back and redo everybody through the new rec that just came through because they know they're looking. Have you the crossover and the emphasis, or the question is in a roundabout way, how are you getting away from trying to recreate the wheel every time you open up a new rec or open up a new hiring and going back on all that work that you've done before for an assessment? Would a person have to take assessment again, or can I carry it over because they applied 3 months ago? Any thoughts on that? Oh, I stumped you.
we have Lever as our ATS, and so we have historical data that's tracked. So for Evergreen Roles, we have Workday as our other system, and so we actually tie recs into one job description. So we might have 9 hires per 9 rec IDs that we have to hire against, but we have one JD that they all apply to so that it's not repetitive. And so it saves the recruiter's time. And also once the Evergreen Roles or the sprint that we're doing is done, we'll close that rec out and reopen another one or JD just because we want to track metrics and see, what the sprint has done. And so we can have historical data to refer back to see what went well, what didn't go well. So that kind of alleviates the notion of, oh, okay, do we have to have them re-interview or retake the assessment if they've done it already? The answer is no. If we already like them and it just so happens that we don't have an open role right then and there, we'll keep them engaged, but then we'll reach back out to them when we have something available, and won't have them go through that whole process again.
How about everybody else? Are you hunting a new meal each day, or are you kind of farming and harvesting?
Farming's to me number one, right? So you look at the people who've been through the process already before you. I mean, sure, you're going to say post the job most likely anyway, right? So and I agree with Brenda. If two roles are similar, there's only one job posting out there. I don't want that to be more difficult than it has to be for a candidate. The only time I'll post two jobs, honestly, is if I put a different title down. Sometimes you get different people responding, you know what I mean? But it's the same, in reality, it's the same job, but it's a little more of a psychology thing that I use. And you get different people responding. I've done that too. So, but yeah, but it's always the pipeline. That's the first thing I always look at is the people in the pipeline, that we've interviewed in the past. And obviously going through your ATS system, you can just go to the jobs and the people that, have applied and the people have made it through the process or that were positive, when you make notes of that and keep those people on your A list, so what I call an A list.
One thing you start seeing nowadays is that the ATSs are starting to get savvy and putting in their own artificial intelligence into their systems because they know that recruiters aren't exactly the best at using their own system to find candidates. So I think that you'll see a lot of ATSs now stepping up to adding this technology in to be able to source through the ATS, which could have 100,000 candidates.
Yeah, and what happens with ATS systems over time is they become filled with a lot of junk, really, and it's almost impossible to get away from that over time. One of the things that I don't like the system we have at our company is when people apply, they go right into our database. So I mean, it's just filling, with whoever. So you're right. I think, having that intelligence, because otherwise your database becomes nothing more than looking at Monster or looking at, another career site every time you're going in. And that's not what you want. So every time I interview a candidate, I put special flags in that candidate skill set, and I rate that candidate. So I never forget that candidate. I go back and have my own personal rating on that candidate. At the time I interviewed them, they were in this skill, but I have to do that because otherwise it just gets lost in that in the ATS system. So
yeah, cleaning up when the rec is full is something that I keep coming back to with my recruiters. Make sure they're not in the eagerness to go off and I guess conquer the next hill, so to speak, from a rec standpoint. Is that they actually usually have a lot of other people that have applied. And if they haven't dispositioned them, in other words, if they do fit the basic requirements, you would look at them, should tag them. We filled this rec, but the next time we have an opening, we'll follow up with you. Thanks. But if they don't fit, then go ahead and, politely reject them. But, start at least with your magazine and the gun that you're going to use for the next rec half full with something. And that's where the tagging helps. You should have a real thoughtful tagging system and have good discipline among the group, whether they're silver medalists, whether they withdraw from the process and you don't get to offer because you didn't have a chance to get there for a variety of different reasons on the candidate side, or if they decline the offer. You should, definitely don't just dismiss it and start over again. Set up the success for the next search.
Excellent. So we've been talking sort of about the top of the funnel, but Brenda, let's jump over to you. I think you're looking more so at the interviewing process for high volume.
Yeah, we do. And we have a great partnership with the business groups that we support. And so they, again, laid out a really clear plan as far as identifying interviewers, competencies that each interviewer is going to focus on. Because again, we are really big about candidate experience and making sure that candidates are being asked different questions by the different interviewers. And then we also have a panel of interviewers who go through our interview training. They've taken unconscious bias training. So they're all fully equipped to assess these candidates. And then we do what we call batch date interviews, which basically means interviewers and hiring managers dedicate a few hours in a day, and we'll do back-to-back interviews. Like we'll probably do 5 to maybe, 5 or 6 at the very most in one given day. And then from that selection, we'll probably select half of those candidates to move forward to offer offer stage. So having a really built out plan is the name of the game here, and having a really well thought out strategy with the partnership of the business groups. Because in our world, recruiting is a team sport. And so getting that buy-in from the business and that dedication and commitment from them to actually make the time to get these hires done is obviously what that partnership is going to evolve to, and what success looks like at the end of the day.
So, and Brenda, you kind of do that batch interviewing for high volume recs. So are you asking for time on an ongoing basis, or is it like a once a month, once a quarter type deal? Or
it's usually, right now we're doing once a month. So right now we have certain specific start dates that we target. And so for example, we do starts every 2 weeks or so. So for this particular start date, we want to aim to get, let's say 9 to 10 hires, right? And so we have to think back and then work backwards as far as how much lead time do we have to start screening candidates? Because right now on a monthly basis, we probably have each of my recruiters with this sprint that we're doing maybe 70 to 75 recruiter screens in a month. So break that down by a weekly basis. And so it's kind of on a quarter over quarter basis, depending upon the volume that we have to go. And so it's not on an ongoing basis, but it's just in a short time frame.
Are your managers coming in, like I'll give you an example, Universal Music, big portion of Reqs was admin coordinators that could go across the whole company. In your high volume, are you talking about a job role that can cross different business units? So you got people from different business units coming into a sprint hiring, or is it all kind of focused on a certain business unit area?
It's a focus on our sales organization, like
Okay.
our internal sales roles. Yeah, because for batch day interviewing, it won't work for more seasoned roles, just because for more higher level roles, that wouldn't kind of necessarily work. But batch day interviews are primarily used for kind of more entry level type roles that we can kind of get through the volume in a more efficient manner.
Brenda also makes a great point when she talked about weekly activity numbers. If you're waiting to see whether you land on the month or the quarter, it's too late. You got a high volume. You need to be looking at, if not daily, then at least weekly, so you can make incremental adjustments on whether it's resources or practices. Don't let the delta pile up to where it ends up in failure.
Yeah, and like for a resourcing perspective too, I wanted to touch upon, like my team we implemented a recruiter sourcer model last year that's proven really to work well. We've cut down agency usage as well as just the source where candidates are coming from. And so for my team, I have either 1 or 2 recruiters per sourcer in every org that my team supports, which has bode well. So from a resourcing perspective, I think that's also something to think about when you do have high volume hiring.
Yeah, one thing I want to mention about the sourcing model real quick. So I truly believe a good recruiter should spend most of their time speaking with people, not 70% of their time sourcing. I don't think that's a good use of yeah, sure, it's part of the business, right? But you know, a good recruiter is the way of capturing that candidate's interest. That's what it's all about to me. So I think, you know, whoever has a sourcing model, I think it could work. It should work if you train the people the correct way, and it would really help the organization.
So regarding sourcers, let me ask the panelists. Typically, what I found is the sourcer is responsible for finding, qualifying via phone screen or what have you, and then getting them in the ATS up against a rec. Recruiter takes it from there. Has anybody seen, I've seen this a couple of times in a pilot basis, and it worked great. The sourcer would not only be tasked with finding new people, but they would also own that top of the funnel to review resumes, do a quick phone screen, and then push those people through. So the recruiter is, if you've been in an agency, was more like an account manager. They would just deal with the hiring team for the most part, maybe do an interview with that candidate just to make sure everybody's on the same page. When you have sourcers, how are you passing the baton, and where's that baton passed?
I think that's what I've seen, just like you described. I think it's that hot lead, if you want to call it that, more the BDR model, the business development rep model for sales. It's that sourcer that's going out, locating those leads, then qualifying the lead, and then putting it through that funnel. And that seemed to work. I have seen it the other way as well, though. I've seen the sourcer just simply doing the initial find and then passing it over and having the recruiter take it from there as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
my sourcing team is the same way. So I have more junior level sourcers. I have more senior level sourcers. My more senior sourcers will do kind of the first initial screen and then pass it to a recruiter. And then maybe my more junior ones will just do 10 to 15-minute pre-qual questions and then pass it to the recruiter. But they are responsible for top of the funnel, looking for new talent, and then also diving into older talent within the database and resurfacing some of those. So they do own the candidates. And I also bake into my sources that they don't lose a candidate after they pass it to the recruiter. I want them to own the candidate through the whole entire process and do check-ins with the recruiter, just again, to provide that level of candidate experience. And so they don't lose that as well.
You know, I'll say I have my sourcers involved through actually the initial screens, particularly if they're learning or junior. I have them shadowing recruiters in that. And that actually sometimes helps generate ideas or thoughtful discussions around other programs or strategies or sources to go after when they hear more information from the prospect, I guess, before they become an applicant per se. But that helps. But yeah, I also agree with Glenn that yeah, recruiters should spend their time recruiting 75% or plus. That's where their value added is.
So to clarify though, if I'm a new applicant under those models, is a sourcer calling me or is the recruiter calling me?
Typically on my team, the recruiter is calling you. The sourcers will probably go through the buckets for calibration of profiles. If there is anyone that fits what we're looking for, then the sourcer typically will move them to stages at the recruiter screen, and the recruiters will initially reach out.
Got it. Okay.
Sourcers usually will reach out to new talent that we're passively sourcing, but not inbound applicants.
Their big brings up a good point in the chat. There is a researcher as well. They have that TA researcher that actually goes out and finds where those applicants are, turns over the rocks and so forth, and then passes it along to maybe the sourcer or the recruiter as well.
Yeah, just from my perspective, my experience, just the most efficient corporate environment I found is when it kind of mimics that agency where one person is responsible for the talent and talking to them, making sure they're all organized correctly and what have you, spending their time on the candidate, both finding new candidates and going through the ones that applied on their own, and then passing over those qualified ones to the recruiter. Recruiter takes those qualified candidates, goes and deals with the hiring manager, scheduling interviews and all that stuff. That's the most fluid and my lowest time to fills I've ever seen is when I had that model in place, because the recruiters and or sourcer, they're focused in an area. They're not trying to juggle a bunch of different things from screening resumes to phone screens of candidates to booking time on the hiring manager's time to following up the interview. That segmentation has been, and typically it's a budget and headcount issue, but if it's there, that's been, in my experience, the most efficient corporate environment that I've been part of.
And I don't think it's difficult to train a sourcer on how to read a resume too, look for flags and everything. So, if you have a good training program to do that, then you won't be missing. My always concern is, am I missing a good candidate? But yeah, I don't think you will miss many at all if you train them the right way.
Yeah, that's why for like new grad or individual contributor level Reqs with their high volume, I'm a big fan of the assessment. Yeah, I'm going to lose somebody. I get that. But I do want to engage and get through as many as I can to find those qualified people and then make sure I make it a good candidate experience. But because it usually just comes down to time from a recruiter's perspective is I don't get through all those applicants because I don't have time. Give me more time and I'll get through them. That's the tools aspect is interesting in that regard. Any other additional items or thoughts? What portion? So I'll give you an example. I've seen 40% of rec loads fall under high volume type job roles at a company. And I was kind of astounded at that when there was no specialization around that specific role. This is unique to each company, but one rec was 40% of all recs that were coming through at a 1,200, 3,000 type employee based company. Are high volume recs for you guys kind of the one-off, or is it sort of, yeah, that's part of the game, high volume, high applicants, high turnover?
I think it depends on how the company is organized. For example, pull back to GoDaddy. I was handling more of the engineering and corporate, and we had a dedicated team that dealt with a call center. And they were doing 1,900 hires a year between 3 call centers. Every month, every quarter, and they knew week by week what the metrics were on that. Do we have lots of engineering hires? Yeah, it looked a little bit different from that team. So I think it really depends on both the seasonality, if that's the case, and the need. And there's all kinds of other factors that play into as far as can you develop talent within. Hertz, I think, for example, starts everybody as a sales rep or a service rep. No, but even the CEO started off that. So if that's the case, I can see where 40% is, or more is certainly the bulk of their hiring. So it varies.
Yeah. Years ago, I worked in a mortgage company, and it was all about the call center. To your point, William, that was it. And then the sales piece of it too. It was sort of lesser qualified sales type roles. So it was high volume, high turnover, keep the engine moving, keep it churning. Okay. I think we're leave it at that, unless you have any final thoughts or comments. It's the high volume. I'm not a big fan of high volume recruiting. I feel for people who have to do it over and over. Some people love it, some people don't, but it can certainly be a grind, and that's for sure. And I've yet to find the silver bullet, but I do think it's recycling the people and taking that approach to it versus recreating the wheel every single time. Any final thoughts or comments, or otherwise we'll call it a day?
Only thing I'll comment on is what you were just talking about, Sean, and I think Lynn was talking about is that if your ATS is not helpful as a repository, seriously thinking about investing and making it functional so that it can help, either overlaying it with search technology or working with a partner that can dig up that. I know one of the things we've taken a step across all positions is asking everybody to put in their LinkedIn profile URL, just so at least we can click on something and get something up to date, even though that may be not the most current resume for that candidate. But seriously look at ways to make search useful in your ATS, because that should be your gold line that you're building and investing in for your company, as opposed to having to do post and pray and hope to find them outside on the cold again.
Yeah, I'm a big believer the best ATS is the one that makes it easy to update with my information that I've gained, and then easy to act on at a later date. I need it. And 2 clicks is 1 click too many for a lot of people. So that's the big secret. Easy to update, easy to act on. Those are the best ATSs.
The technology is important. I think people forget, or these companies that don't invest in the technology on the TA side, it's really a crime, because that's really what's helping that process. It's pushing it forward, and it's not just helping the recruiters, it's helping the hiring managers quite a bit. So
yeah, it's all about the people that help grow an organization, right? So the people you hire, I'm saying, yeah.
And I keep hearing everybody wants click and drag now. If you ever use Trello, everybody wants it to be like Trello and make everything happen on the back end. All right. Well, hey, thank you everybody for another session. I really appreciate it. I'll let you go and enjoy the rest of your day.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Sean.
Thanks, folks. Bye-bye.
Yeah.